Did they build shelters? Yes. But the answer is so much bigger than that. It's not a simple yes or no. It's a story that starts with finding a decent tree to sleep in and ends with us, sitting in temperature-controlled boxes, reading things on screens. The need for shelter is one of the most basic drives in the animal kingdom. It's right up there with finding food and making more of yourself. A shelter is a buffer. It's a space between you and a world that is, frankly, trying to kill you. The world is full of things that are too hot, too cold, too wet, or too toothy. A shelter is the first line of defense. It's a pause button on the constant pressure of survival. Before we even get to our own ancestors, look around. Life is a master builder. Think of a termite mound. It's not just a pile of dirt, it's a city. It's a skyscraper of mud and spit with its own ventilation system. Tunnels draw in cool air from below and vent hot air out the top. The colony lives in a managed climate, safe from the blistering sun outside. The termites didn't go to architecture school. They don't hold planning meetings. This knowledge is baked into their genes. It is a collective, instinctual act of construction that has been refined over millions of years of evolution. They build because the ones that didn't build died. It's that simple. Or think of a beaver. A beaver looks at a flowing stream and sees a problem. A stream is loud. The water level changes. It doesn't offer great protection, so the beaver decides to change the landscape. It chews down trees and builds a dam. It creates a calm, deep pond. In the middle of that pond, it builds a lodge out of mud and sticks. The entrance is underwater. No wolf or bear is getting in there easily. The beaver didn't just build a house. It engineered an entire ecosystem to create the perfect, safe location for its house. That's a level of construction that changes the world around it. Again, this isn't a conscious choice in the way we think of it. It's a deep, powerful instinct. Birds are maybe the most obvious example. A bird's nest is a marvel of engineering. A weaver bird in Africa will literally tie knots in blades of grass to create an intricate hanging basket safe from snakes. An eagle will build a massive platform of sticks high in a tree, a structure so sturdy it can last for years. A hummingbird will use spider silk to bind together soft plant matter, creating a tiny, flexible cup for its even tinier eggs. Each nest is a perfect solution to a specific set of problems: what predators are around. What's the weather like? What materials are available? The nest is a temporary home built for the most vulnerable stage of life, raising the young. It's a cradle, a fortress, and a nursery all in one. So when we ask if our ancestors built shelters, we have to remember this context. The drive to find or make a safe space is not a uniquely human idea. It's a fundamental part of being an animal. The real question for our lineage is, when did we move from simply using shelter to actively building it? And what does that shift tell us about our minds? Let's go back, way back, maybe 4 or 5 million years ago. We have early hominins, creatures like Australopithecus, Lucy, and her kind. They were walking upright, but they still had long arms and curved fingers. They were still comfortable in the trees. For them, a shelter was likely a big, sturdy tree. At night, they'd climb up, away from the big cats and hyenas that patrolled the ground. A tree was a ready-made shelter. It offered a vertical escape. They didn't need to build anything. They just needed good climbing skills and the sense to pick the right tree. Caves were another option. A cave is the ultimate natural shelter. It's got a roof. It has walls. It's out of the wind and the rain. For millions of years, caves were prime real estate. If you found a good dry cave that wasn't already occupied by a cave bear, you were set. We find the bones of our ancestors in caves, but for a very long time we don't find much else. We find their remains and the remains of the animals they ate or that ate them. There are no signs of construction, no post holes, no walls made of stacked rocks. They were tenants, not landlords. They used what was there, the environment provided the shelter, and they were smart enough to use it. This isn't a small thing. Recognizing a safe space is a cognitive skill, but it's not the same as building one. The first big shift probably came with a creature called Homo habilis, the handyman. This is around 2.5 million years ago. Their name comes from the fact that we find their bones alongside the first simple stone tools. These were just rocks smashed against other rocks to create a sharp edge. A basic but revolutionary technology. A sharp stone can butcher a carcass, it can cut plants, and it can sharpen a stick. Could these first toolmakers have built shelters? It's possible, but the evidence is almost non-existent. Maybe they could use a sharp stone to cut down some large branches to create a simple windbreak. A pile of brush against a rock face to block the evening chill. Something that simple wouldn't survive for 2 million years. Wood rots, piles of leaves blow away. Archaeology has a hard time seeing things that are so temporary. So, we are left to speculate. It makes sense that a creature smart enough to make a tool might also be smart enough to make a very basic shelter. A nest on the ground. But we have no direct proof. They were still likely using caves and trees most of the time. The big advantage of a tool is that it lets you modify your world. But for a long time, it seems that modification was focused on getting food, not building a home. Things get much more interesting with Homo erectus. These were a seriously successful group of hominins. They appeared around 2 million years ago and stuck around for an incredibly long time. They had bigger brains than habilis, they were taller, more like us, and they were explorers. They were the first of our ancestors to leave Africa, spreading out across Asia and Europe. When you move into new lands, you face new problems. Colder climates, different predators, different seasons. This puts a lot of pressure on you to be adaptable, and this is where we see the next huge leap in technology, the control of fire. Fire changes everything. A fire at the mouth of a cave does more than just provide warmth and light. It keeps animals out. A lion will think twice about entering a bright, smoky cave. Fire makes a shelter an active, defended space. It becomes a home base. A hearth is the center of social life. It's where you cook food, making it easier to digest and safer to eat. It's where you share that food. It's where you sit in the darkness, safe and warm, while the cold and the predators are kept outside. The act of maintaining a fire in one place, a hearth, is a kind of shelter construction. You are not building walls, but you are building a zone of safety. You are modifying your environment in a profound way. So did Homo erectus build freestanding structures. Here, the evidence gets tantalizing, but also very controversial. There's a famous site in France called Terra Amata. It's about 400,000 years old. Archaeologists there uncovered what they believe are the remains of several huts. They found oval patterns of stakes or post holes, suggesting a framework of branches was put into the ground. In the center of these ovals, they found hearths, places where fires had been repeatedly lit. The interpretation was that these were seasonal beach huts used by Homo erectus who came to the coast to hunt and fish. It's a beautiful picture. Our ancient ancestors building shelters on a beach, sitting around a fire. But other archaeologists are skeptical. They argue that the post holes could have been created by natural processes like tree roots or water action. The hearths might just be the remains of natural brush fires. It's incredibly difficult to be certain about something that happened so long ago. What we can say is that at sites like this, we see the beginnings of the idea. The idea of a home base, a specific spot on the landscape that you return to, that you maintain with fire, and that you might have improved with a simple structure. Even if they were just flimsy windbreaks, that's a huge step up from just finding a cave. It's the beginning of making a home, not just finding one. Now we move forward in time to our closest extinct relatives, the Neanderthals. For a long time, Neanderthals had a bad reputation. They were seen as brutish, dim-witted cavemen. We now know that's completely wrong. They were intelligent, sophisticated hunters who survived in Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. And they were definitely masters of shelter. They lived in caves, yes. We find their hearths, their tools, their butchered animal bones deep inside caves across Europe and the Middle East. A cave was a great place to be during an ice age, but did they build? The evidence is mounting that they did. Inside some caves, archaeologists have found evidence of partitions. They might have used animal hides hung from a simple frame to create separate living spaces within a larger cave. A bedroom area, a butchering area, a tool-making area, this shows a mind that can organize space. A home is not just one big room. It's a place with different functions. More dramatically, there is evidence of structures built out in the open. Again, this is hard to find because they were likely made of wood and hides, which rot away. But sometimes we get lucky. We find the outline of their structures, and sometimes they used more durable materials. In a cave in France called Bruniquel, researchers found something astonishing. Deep inside the cave, a place with no natural light, someone had broken off hundreds of stalagmites and arranged them into 2 large rings on the cave floor. They had even built smaller piles of stalagmites inside the rings. Traces of fire show these structures were lit up. This was done 176,000 years ago. The only hominins in Europe at that time were Neanderthals. This wasn't a house. You wouldn't live there. It's too deep in the cave. It was likely a ritual space, a meeting place. But it is, without a doubt, a construction. It required planning, cooperation, and a shared goal. They had to break the stalagmites, carry them, and carefully place them according to a design. It proved that Neanderthals had the cognitive ability and the technical skill to build. If they could build this, they could almost certainly build a simple hut for shelter. Their minds were not just focused on the immediate needs of food and warmth. They could create symbolic spaces, they could build for reasons beyond simple survival. This brings us to our own species, Homo sapiens. We appeared in Africa around 300,000 years ago. For a long time, our behavior was quite similar to Neanderthals. We used caves, we made sophisticated stone tools, we hunted. But then, around 50,000 years ago, something changes. We see an explosion of art, of symbolism, of new technologies. And with it, we see an explosion in shelter construction. During the height of the last ice age, our ancestors were living in some of the harshest environments on Earth. Cold, open plains of Eastern Europe and Siberia, there were very few trees. Caves were scarce. So, what did they use to build? They used the most abundant material around mammoth bones. At sites like Mezhyrich in Ukraine, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of incredible huts built from the bones of woolly mammoths. These were not just crude piles of bone, they were elaborate planned structures. Imagine it. They would create a circular foundation using the massive interlocking jaws of mammoths. The walls were built from stacks of leg bones, shoulder blades, and pelvises. The roof was likely a frame of wood or large bones covered with animal hides. Tusks were used to create an arched entranceway. Some of these huts used the bones of dozens of mammoths. This represents an enormous investment of time and energy. You have to hunt the mammoths, which is no small task. You have to butcher them, then transport these heavy bones to your building site. You have to have a mental blueprint of what you want to build. Inside these bone huts, they had multiple hearths. They had pits dug into the floor for storing food, a kind of prehistoric refrigerator in the permafrost. They had areas for making tools and areas for sleeping. These were complex, long-term homes designed to withstand the brutal Ice Age winds. This is a universe away from a simple windbreak. This is architecture. It tells us about their social lives. Building a structure like this required a whole group of people working together. It suggests these were not just small, wandering bands, but larger communities that stayed in one place for a significant part of the year. The shelter became the anchor of the community, and they used other materials too. In other places, we find the remains of sunken huts. They would dig a pit into the ground for insulation, then build a roof of wood and sod over the top. We find tent-like structures with rings of stones used to hold down the edges of hide tents. They were incredibly innovative. They looked at the world around them, saw the available materials, and figured out how to build what they needed. Their shelters were a direct response to the challenges of their environment. This all leads to the biggest revolution in human history, and the biggest revolution in the history of shelter, the invention of farming. Around 12,000 years ago, in various parts of the world, people started to settle down. Instead of chasing animals, they started growing crops and raising animals. And when you become a farmer, you can't wander around anymore. You have to stay near your fields. You need a place to store your harvest. You need a permanent home. This is the moment we go from building huts to building houses. From temporary shelters to permanent dwellings. One of the earliest known towns is a place called Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey. It's about 9,000 years old. It was a city of mud brick houses all packed together like a honeycomb. There were no streets. You walked around on the rooftops and climbed down a ladder into your home through a hole in the ceiling. The houses were all very similar in size. Inside, they were decorated with elaborate wall paintings of hunting scenes and geometric patterns. People were buried under the floors of their own homes. The house wasn't just a place to live. It was the family's history. It was their connection to their ancestors. It was their identity. The shift to permanent shelters changed humanity forever. A permanent house allows you to accumulate stuff. You can have more tools, more pottery, more everything because you don't have to carry it on your back. It creates a stronger sense of place and property. It leads to the growth of villages, then towns, then cities. The simple act of building a permanent wall around yourself reshaped our societies, our economies, and even our minds. So, when we ask, did they build shelters? The answer is a long and winding story. It starts with an ape-like creature looking for the right branch to sleep on. It moves to a clever toolmaker piling up some brush to block the wind. It becomes a master of fire, turning a dark cave into a warm, safe hearth. It becomes a Neanderthal, thoughtfully arranging stalagmites deep in the earth. It becomes an Ice Age hunter, building a magnificent dome of bone on the frozen tundra. And it finally becomes a farmer, laying one mud brick on top of another, creating not just a house, but a home, a town, a civilization. Each step in that journey is a reflection of a growing mind. To build a shelter, you need to be able to look at the world and see not just what is there, but what could be there. You see a pile of rocks and imagine a wall. You see a pile of bones and imagine a house. You need a plan for the future. You don't build a shelter for right now. You build it for the night that is coming, for the storm that is on the horizon, for the winter that you know will arrive. It requires foresight. It requires cooperation. It requires the ability to hold a complex idea in your head and then make it real in the world. The shelters our ancestors built are more than just archaeological curiosities. They are the fossilized evidence of their minds at work. These simple circular huts echo the small family based groups. The larger, more complex structures tell us about growing communities. The materials they use tell us about their ingenuity and their relationship with their local environment. The evolution of shelter is the evolution of us. It's the story of how we went from being creatures that hide from the world to creatures that build our own. And we've never stopped building since.